Welcome back to another episode of McDaniel Motorsports. I'm Chris, still building the Charger. I was super excited that Vintage Air makes up these hoses for the system, and I'm starting to regret that. And here's why. So I'm just now finally getting the layout of these things, and it's a little bit confusing just following the schematic that they provide. Fully detailed, nothing's on them. Honestly, I think they do a really good job of explaining how it goes. But like I said in the last segment, they used to leave one of the hose, or I think one or two of the hose ends off, and they would provide a fitting. So basically you would take that to a hose shop or buy a hose crimper yourself and do it. So I have the hose kit because I've done a few of these kits, but like I was saying, they used to not make up all the hoses, so you could run them really close together and then decide your length, and what's more important than length is clocking. So these hoses don't swivel, so on the hose you have to actually not only mark your length, but you have to mark the clocking the way it goes. So you got to plug one end in and then run it with temporary zip ties or wherever you need to go, and then you mark your end, and then how the fitting is to be clocked on the hose, because it crimps on that hose. So I'll give you an example here, but I wanted to show you one of my issues here. So this is that number 6 hose coming off of the evaporator, coming through here in the firewall, going through the grommet like it's supposed to, but you can see how it's going way up inside the fender over my custom fabricated inner fender support. Thanks, Lou. And then it runs over here. So now this looks okay, but there's a lot of slack up in there. Let's see if I turn this light off. So now that it's kind of equalizing, you can see this number 6 hose right here is too long. So that's kind of a bummer, and because of the clocking, really can't do much about it other than just cut it and put a new fitting on it, which isn't the end of the world. I've done it before. It's pretty common. So I have to cut this guy off and get another 90. No big deal. And this is roughly the way these lines go, and then you basically drill a hole here in the inner fender and clamping them to the inner fender here, like one with an Adele coming off, basically using the same hole for both, and then doing individual Adeles further up. One here. I'm going to try to use that factory hole, and then this factory hole as well. So this isn't the biggest deal. And then these are for the heater hose. I'm going to do that last. So the bigger issue that I've struggled with, and in the last segment, I'm like, they were calling this test port, or we'll call it a test port right here. They call for it to be down there, and I'm thinking, well, why have a test port here on the high pressure side and have the low pressure side be over there? I don't know if there's any sort of science behind that, but I tried it both ways. I like the test ports to be next to each other. For one, it'll get, it might be somewhat hidden by the hose running this way, but that's really not my biggest concern. So the issue here is, before I go too deep into another tangent, is, so if I was to run this hose like next to each other, which is ideal, and pick this guy up down here, and so I have the wrong fitting, so I would need a 90 for that to work, and it needs to be reclocked also. See what I mean? So this 20-degree fitting is basically on there not doing anything, because if I put it on the way it is, I would have to do it like this, and that's not good for anybody. So I can't handle that. That's not I can't do that. So anyway, so you see what I'm talking about. This stuff, it just takes time, and it's tedious, and it's frustrating sometimes, especially if you live far away from a hose fitting place. A lot of the stuff has to be ordered online for you guys. I get it. So anyway, just sharing my experience. Making a list here. I'm gonna go hit the hose store tomorrow, but I've got plenty of other stuff to do, so hang on, I'll be right back. All right, taking a break from the air conditioning stuff. Sometimes you just gotta keep working and keep things going on the car. This may be trivial to a lot of you, but it might be helpful to some of you. So I'm starting out with just some typical brass fittings from the auto parts store for the fuel pump that I don't think is up for the task. Strangely enough, there's very few mechanical fuel pumps that make a lot of pressure. I don't know why, but the one I have is 80 lph liters per hour, and I believe that's not going to be enough. So anyway, I'm gonna get this thing running and then we'll find out later. So just typical brass fittings for the fuel pump, mechanical of course. Don't use Teflon tape or any sort of tape on these types of fittings, especially fuel. You need to use this. You don't have to use the Permatex brand itself, but you want to use like a sealant or a form gasket liquid, like this stuff. This stuff is super nasty and it doesn't ever dry, but it is the only sealing that I will use on any sort of NPT fittings or national pipe taper threads. I used to think it was national pipe thread, but it's actually national pipe taper, because these threads, if you look closely, taper from the top down to the bottom, and that's how they make their seal. But they don't seal by themselves, so you have to use sealant. Again, super trivial to those more informed viewers, but for those who were not informed, I'm using this stuff just to show you. So let me get this stuff put on here and I'll show you. And just to head off some comments, it might even be national pipe taper and not nominal pipe taper. I'm sure somebody will correct me, but put it in the comments. Tell me I'm wrong. Even I can learn something every once in a while, and I'm cool with that. It's the whole reason why we're on YouTube, right? To learn something. So just basically pasting it on. It's pretty straightforward, but this stuff will not break down with fuel. That's why it's recommended for this kind of an application. But don't be stingy with it. It's like roofing tar, it gets everywhere, so prepare yourself. But you're actually supposed to let it set up for a little bit and just kind of let it tack up a little, just so it doesn't run everywhere. But who's got time for that? There you go. This stuff it's pretty nasty. This whole container will probably last me a lifetime, but it is good. I've never had a leak with it, but I've ruined some rags with it, that's for sure. All right, let's get these on the car. All right, again, pretty straightforward stuff here. The fuel pumps have an in and an out. Obviously, in would be from the tank and out would be to the carburetor or fuel injection. You won't see a mechanical pump serving fuel injection, just be aware of that. However, you can get these little fittings in 90s and straights. I opted for a 90 and a straight. My stainless hardline is running parallel to the passenger side frame here, so I decided to use a barb straight. So I'm going to put that guy on the in. Makes the most sense. And put the 90 going, it's going to be going upward like that to the carburetor. And don't forget your fuel filters. I'm not going to put them on at this time, but I have them. I will be using a 10 and a 100 micron filter. There'll be two separate ones. They're little Holly anodized ones. They're pretty fancy for the application, but I actually had one of them, so it'll save a little money. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of experience with high performance mechanical fuel pumps, and from the industry it doesn't look like, unless I'm looking at Summit, Jegs, Speedway, there are really a limited amount of mechanical pumps these days, and probably because everyone's going to electronic. But man, I just didn't want to do that on this car unless I have to. Just tired of fuel pumps going bad and leaving me stranded, and then you have to have them in the tank. It's a hassle. But in the tank ones are the go-to, I think, for reliability. But they're a pain to service, so there's that. Alright. Now this stuff does dry to some degree to make a seal, but that thread will basically smash it into the fitting, or the threads on the fitting. That's 90. There's my AN wrench being handy again. I love this thing. Goes where other wrenches don't. And it's one size fits all. And from what I can figure on this engine, I'm going to need at least 120 liter per hour pump. And I believe, if I'm correct, this is a Speedway pump, and it's only either 60 or 80 lph, liters per hour, so it's not exactly a high performance unit, or up to the horsepower level we're making here. I'm trying to angle this fitting to where there's a good smooth path of travel through the accessories, and you can see I have a little bit of a path going up through there. See how that 90 is pointed upwards, so it's going to go that way and go through those soft spacers there, just to keep it from snagging on anything. So again, trivial, but I just thought I'd share. Hey guys, so today's a new day, and I am trying to get that dash wiring harness sorted out to where it looks acceptable. And it seems daunting when you pull it out of the box, like it just wires going everywhere. Some are kind of longer than others, and then the same connector, which drives me mad. But I'll give you a hint on how to sort that out, because it's overwhelming. There's a lot of wiring, and it seems when they're all just going every which way, it's like, oh my god, how am I going to start this? So the way I do it, and this may be wrong, but it works for me, and I've gotten better each time I've done this, so don't be afraid to do it. Every single wire is every 3 inches labeled, so you really can't go wrong as long as you follow the directions and land those wires where they're supposed to be. But I find that it helps to sort these wires out before you start connecting anything. And here's what I mean. So basically, you have this really long harness, and when it's not tidied up like this, they're going all over the place, and it's super overwhelming. So what I do is I start at the very beginning, and I throw a zip tie here, just loose, just to kind of capture the wires and start. And then every plug, I will leave a little freedom with every plug. So basically, so I can pull it out, hook things up to it, and then I'll tidy it back up once I have it connected to what it's powering. And then I'll go to the next wire that comes to branch off or pair. Like this is the radio. It's see, this guy is the heater and AC feed. You know, obviously this is going to need to be here in the center of the dash ish, right around here. So I'll break those guys out, and then I'll kind of land it like before I will put a zip tie before they break off, and kind of keep the rest of the wires that are running beyond that kind of tidy. And then I'll go to the next one, find this courtesy light feed right here, and I'll put a zip tie in and leave that guy exposed, and so on and so forth. So every single plug is exposed and has it, you know, 3 or 4 inches of play to move around, and then keep on going and tidying. You know, I use a lot of zip ties just to keep it tidy, but they do grab on stuff, so I caution you on using too many. But this harness will be sitting in these little captured tabs. Not this guy. This guy actually feeds down, I believe, but these guys continue on. And so it just makes it. And then where it kind of gets even more trickier is when these feeds will horseshoe, as you can see right here, and then you kind of just gotta, like I started with, just every plug, pull it off, make sure you can get to it. You don't want to bury it, obviously, because you'll never find it once it's in the dash. And fortunately and unfortunately, these dashes are pre-wired before they go in the car, so it's kind of a double-edged sword. But it's also kind of neat to where you can pull the whole thing out if you need to and troubleshoot it, whatever. So yeah, so the horseshoes get a little more complicated, but you still just use the same practice as you go down, and that actually works for me very well. But it does take some practice, and you can always cut the zip ties off and start over, or go back up to the next one and cut that off and refeed. Sometimes you have to do like a back loop, for instance, like this, to where I'm at the end and the wires are not the same length, but they're plugged into the same plug, like this. And so you can just do a back loop like that to make them all the same length. Hopefully you can see that, because it makes me crazy when you have a plug and it's all doing that, because this wire is shorter than this wire. So anyway, I know it's kind of a rambler, but it's an absolute necessary evil, and you have to do it. Obviously, don't forget your grounds. Leave those guys out and free. I would give these guys a little more, and then you can always tidy them up once the dash is in the car. So I'll leave my grounds with a little more freedom than just a few inches, in case you make a ground lug and you go centrally grounding everything. You know, in this case it's probably not going to be that way, but and then you have the bulkhead fitting, and basically all the power in the car goes through this guy still, in a way more safe fashion than the factory. And then also cool, American Auto Wire actually leaves a few spares in here, and in my case, as you saw, my MSD box has to go in the car, so I'm going to run my big probably 10 gauge, maybe an 8. I have to figure out, see if it's going to be any significant voltage drop, but going straight to the battery, those wires are going to have to pass through that firewall at some point. So I'd be happier if these wires were captured in the bulkhead fitting rather than going through a grommet. Grommets leak, they're cracked, whatever. So plastic does too, but I think this is a better way. So anyway, I'm gonna keep on going. Just thought I'd share. What's up, guys? I am back from a vacation that I really needed, just to get away, not do charger stuff. The thing about these builds is you have to maintain your mental health. Otherwise it weighs on you. I know this is like supposed to be fun, but some days are just miserable, and you just seem like you can't get anything on the car, and no matter if it fits or not, it just doesn't fit, or needs this or that, or screws or bolts, or anyway, that's enough of my rant. I'm way more refreshed now. Went out to visit my friend in Arizona who painted the car. It seems to be my vacation spot these days. Just love being out there. I'm actually looking for a place to live out there one of these days, with more room so I can build more stuff. But wanted to show you guys where I'm at. Sorry about not posting a video this week. It was a little bit of a misunderstanding between my editor and I, but it's all good. Hopefully you guys still are interested. But here is where I'm at. So, doesn't look like much has happened, but I promise you it has. So, I've been tidying up all this wiring here. Here's my bulkhead. And just getting basically all the connectors that are going to connect to the dash harness in place. And I'm securing everything up and out of the way because it's going to be a lot easier to do it now than it is in the car. So again, I'm just trying to make sure I have everything. I still have to do the courtesy lights and run those wires over there and then over here. I did finally get my dash covers. So obviously the gauge cluster is there, and I've got this guy to go in now. I'm having a hard time finding screws for this because the holes are just so big, and so the fasteners that came with the Dakota Digital are the machine screws, and those aren't going to work because they don't have a washer on them, and B, I don't think it's machine thread. So there's that. Kind of what I meant earlier. It's just like all this stuff just wears on you after a while. So, but I did get the stereo plate in there. Those screws are going to become those black screws, so don't worry. And then the one above the glove box there, happy about that. But man, is this stuff expensive. Like these 3 panels, the 2 I just showed you, and this one, my God, it's insane. So so there's that, and I finally figured out where to mount my MSD box. That's been kind of a challenge. I know it sounds silly, but I don't want it in the engine compartment visible, and I tried to mount it underneath my battery box. That didn't work because my vacuum canister finally came in, and so this is what I settled on. I've got some tactical grip tape by my good buddy Darren. He hooked me up with that. He's a gun guy, gun dealer, so he has the good stuff. And I couldn't drill holes through this without interfering with the splash guard over here, and then the inner fender support bracket over here. So I'm glad I didn't drill those holes. But man, you really ought to be careful with drilling holes in these cars because you can't take it back unless you want to re-weld it and paint it again, and that's not what I'm doing. So but yeah, we're looking up. So I'm just kind of tidying up these wires. So by mounting this box, this MSD box in here, the large power wires, the big heavy red and black, have to go directly to the battery. So obviously I'm gonna have to extend this, but because it's power, I am shielding it by itself in its own little sheath here instead of wrapping it up with everything else. And then I have my magnetic pickup wire here. The purple and green goes to the distributor, and these are my positive and negative. The orange is positive, negative to the coil. So still haven't mounted the ignition coil yet. I'm still trying to figure out a spot, but basically see how I've separated them. I've got these 2 guys. That's my ignition trigger. This is my tack output. This guy, tack gray, and then I actually snipped off the white. So the white is only used for points. So you basically just snip it off and just leave it. I will put a connector on there just to avoid it from, if there's any voltage coming out of that thing, I'll eliminate that as an issue. But the reason I have these guys going over here is because they go that way and stay inside the car. These 3 pairs, twisted pairs, if you will, and I've taped up my magnetic pickup here just to make sure that that doesn't come undone at a later date. That's a little bit, it's the off-road guy in me, I guess. Just wanted to make sure it's not an issue. But so I gotta find a grommet that I can stick these guys through the firewall, and what I want to do is come through here in the firewall, maybe directly possibly down in here below this plate. I don't want to drill through that, so maybe above the hump where you're not going to see it, and I could just sneak those guys through and then jump onto that this wire holder clip thing. I want to come out and then go up to that guy, and then continue on that way. So let me work on that, and then as you can see, my temperature probe and oil pressure wires are just hanging out there. Those are from Dakota Digital, and those are already twisted pair with the shield. So we're going to run everything that way. And another reason, I'm sure maybe you remember, maybe you don't, is this. I had to keep that MSD box away from that Dakota Digital expansion module, so I had to mount it over here just to keep it away. So in avoiding running those power wires for the MSD box near that Dakota Digital interface is really highly recommended as well. So it's tough finding hiding spots for this stuff, because you have to connect it and run the wires somewhere, and nobody wants to see wires either. So anyway, so that's the update for today. Oh, I do want to show you, somebody is making vacuum canisters. And I was lucky enough to find one, because I am going to give it a good try. But this, as you can see down there, my vacuum canister. And so what, for those of you who don't know what the vacuum canister is, it's basically like a bucket of water if you think about it, but it's actually a bucket of suction, if you will. Let's see here, get a better light here somewhere. Yeah, it's just not very good. Anyway, so basically the engine draws vacuum at idle. At idle it's pulling peak amount of vacuum. And so basically that's going to put that little can into a negative. And so you have, there's 3 tubes coming off here and going up there, and that goes right in this hole right there. And 1 tube will break off here and will go to the intake manifold, and then the other 2 tubes will go through there. So one of the tubes that goes through that hole will, or both tubes will connect to the switch, the headlight switch. And one of the tubes is a constant vacuum source, and the other tube is basically the switch leg, if you will, in electrical terms, for the headlights. So there's always vacuum at the first one I mentioned, and then the second one I mentioned is only going to provide vacuum when that headlight switch is turned on. So it's basically just a vacuum relay, if you will. And these switches, I'll show you the switch I have just so you can kind of visualize it. Here it is. So there it is right there. So as you can see, I guess there's 3 there. So I take it back. So this one is most likely vacuum, constant vacuum. And then when this switch is turned on, that brings what's coming in here as vacuum to these 2 guys. And then each individual headlight has its own tube going out to it. That's the way I understand it. If I'm wrong, by all means, jump on me in the comments. But it's a damn shame, because I bet this switch works. It just looks like hell. The switch itself, it's a bummer. I wish somebody sold these switches, because I would try to buy one and transfer it over. But I have yet to find one. These switches are on back order, unfortunately, through Classic Industries. So yeah, so that's the update. I am working my ass off to get this thing ready. I appreciate you guys hanging in there with us, and we're gonna keep on trucking.